Let me tell you about the time I almost lost my job, my sanity, and quite literally the town's water supply, because of a woman named Karen and her pathological obsession with order. It started on a Thursday. Quiet, sunny, deceptively peaceful. Birds were chirping. Lawns were symmetrical. And I was out back admiring the side gate I'd just finished building. Custom-made cedar. Reinforced hinges. Stained to match the trim of the house. This thing was a masterpiece. Functional. Beautiful. And more importantly, it concealed a crucial emergency access point to a municipal water bypass line that ran directly under my yard. You know. Minor detail. I'm mason. Civil engineer. Infrastructure manager for Pine Valley County by unfortunate promotion. I deal in asphalt, steel, and occasionally, bureaucratic nightmares. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for Karen Wilkins. Vice President of the Willow Creek HOA and part-time dictator in pastel capris. You didn't file an architectural request, she said. Arms crossed. Clipboard trembling with suppressed rage as she stood in my driveway 3 days after I built the gate. This structure, she continued, gesturing like it was a war crime, violates Article 4, Section C of the HOA Design Guidelines. It's a gate, I replied. On my land. Built with my materials. Over a public utility easement that I maintain for the county. Karen squinted. Unconvinced. Well, it's visible from the street. That's called a fence. Karen. She did not laugh. Instead, I came home the next week to find my gate chain shut. Not a flimsy bike lock. Mind you, a gleaming steel chain looped 3 times through the slats. Padlocked. With a laminated sign zip-tied to the post, HOA access only, unauthorized entry prohibited. And there she was, watering her hydrangeas across the street like she hadn't just committed the pettiest act of sabotage in county history. I walked over, holding up my phone with the county easement map. You locked off an emergency water control valve, I said. This isn't just a fence, it's infrastructure. Karen didn't miss a beat. Then maybe next time. She smiled. You'll file the correct paperwork. Karen, I said. If there's a break in the main line upstream, we need access within minutes. That chain could cost the town its water pressure. Well, she chirped, turning back to her flowers. Then I guess you better hope nothing breaks. I stood there stunned, trying to process if she'd actually just threatened the county's utilities system in the same tone someone might use to remind you to bring a casserole to a potluck. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just cut the chain? Break the lock? File a complaint? I did all of that. The county legal office sent a formal notice. Karen filed a counterclaim citing unauthorized modifications and claimed the easement was under review by the HOA board, which, by the way, had no legal jurisdiction over the easement in the first place. Still, I let it ride. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew, deep down, Karen wasn't going to stop. And if she wanted to play HOA chicken with the county water system, I was going to let her crash first. I started documenting everything. Emails, photos, phone calls, her little sign, her smug little smirk, every detail catalogued. And then, one morning, the call came in. 6:42 a.m. Main line rupture. Pressure dropping. Backup reroute to Sector 12, said the dispatcher over my radio. Sector 12. My yard. The gate. I threw on a shirt, ran outside barefoot, and there it was. Still chained. Still padlocked. Still bearing that ridiculous laminated sign. 2 fire trucks and a utility van were already pulling up behind me. Karen was on the sidewalk in a bathrobe, arms flailing, shouting something about trespassers and protocol. I didn't even glance at her. I grabbed my sledgehammer. She screamed, "You can't touch that gate, it's HOA property." And I said the line that would end up on t-shirts by the end of the month. Karen, I warned you. Now watch what happens. Then I kicked it. The chain snapped. The gate swung open. And the town held its breath. The morning it all went down started like any other, coffee half full, inbox overflowing, and the distinct feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. I didn't expect to become the main character in a real-life disaster drill. But then again, I hadn't counted on Karen. At 6:42 a.m., my phone lit up with a code I'd seen only twice in my career: grid redirect, Sector 12. Sector 12 was my property. The emergency reroute line, buried beneath the turf I'd fertilized just last week, was about to take on the full redirected pressure of a neighboring district's water supply. That meant over 3,000 residents were now depending on a single bypass valve to keep pressure stable, prevent contamination, and, most importantly, keep the water flowing. Only problem? Karen's chain. I was halfway into my boots when the fire chief's voice crackled into my earpiece. "Mason, tell me that gate's open." I didn't answer. I sprinted out the door, shirt half buttoned, just in time to see two fire engines screech to a halt at the curb. Lights blaring. The utility response team jumped out of their van, gear in hand, heading straight for the side gate, only to stop short. Still locked. Still chained. Still bearing Karen's smug little sign like a monument to bureaucratic idiocy. And speaking of idiocy, she was already there. Karen stood planted on the sidewalk in her floral print robe and designer flip-flops, arms crossed, shouting at uniformed responders like she was the general of some HOA army. "This is private property," she snapped. "You can't just barge in here like it's a war zone." One of the firefighters held up his badge. "Ma'am, we're responding to a county infrastructure emergency. Step aside." "I am the HOA vice president," she barked, "and this area is under architectural restriction." I could see the fire chief blinking like he'd been hit in the head with a dictionary. "Mason," he growled, "we need that valve now." I didn't speak. I didn't ask for permission. I just walked over to my shed, grabbed the sledgehammer I kept for concrete emergencies, and returned to that gate, the one I'd hand-built, reinforced, stained, and, as of that morning, been forced to declare war on. Karen was still mid-rant. "And if anyone touches that lock, I swear I will press charges." I looked her square in the eye. My voice was calm, controlled. "Karen, I warned you. Now watch what happens." And I kicked it. The chain snapped on the first hit. The gate exploded open, wood creaking as the impact echoed down the street. Beyond it, the bypass valve hissed with pressure, ready to burst if we'd waited even 5 more minutes. The response crew rushed past me, tools clanking, radios flaring. Within moments, the valve was engaged, the system stabilized, and what could have been a county-wide water failure turned into a footnote. Karen, however, wasn't ready to be a footnote. She screamed, "You just destroyed HOA property. That gate was under lock for a reason." A firefighter looked at her like she'd just declared war on oxygen. "Lady, we almost had to start emergency water rations because of that lock." She spun toward me, fists balled. "I'm calling the sheriff." "Please do," I said, brushing gate debris off my jeans. "Bring him a glass of water while you're at it. You know, now that you have it again." That's when the fire chief's voice came over the earpiece again, lower, more serious this time. "Mason, we've got a legal complication. She's already on the phone with dispatch." I exhaled. Of course she was. Of course the woman who thought clipboard's equal jurisdiction would turn a life-threatening crisis into a personal lawsuit opportunity. That's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was dangerous. She had filed a land use claim through the HOA behind our backs, just enough paperwork to cause chaos if no one looked too hard. And now, with the gate broken and the water flowing again, she was trying to play the victim. I glanced down at the busted lock lying in the grass. The padlock had a clean dent from the sledgehammer. Her little sign was now hanging sideways, fluttering in the breeze like a flag of defeat. And that was just the beginning. The sheriff was on his way. The chain may have snapped, But the real fallout was just beginning. The sheriff arrived with the kind of expression you only see on men who know their entire morning is about to go off the rails. He stepped out of his cruiser, took one look at the fire trucks, the broken gate, and Karen waving a stack of documents like a traffic cone, and sighed like a man who regretted his career choices. Karen rushed up first. "Officer. Thank goodness you're here. I want him arrested." She pointed at me, practically vibrating. "He destroyed HOA property, endangered residents, and physically threatened me." The sheriff glanced at the shattered lock, then at me. "You the homeowner?" "Yes," I said, keeping my voice level. "Also the county infrastructure manager. That gate covers a water bypass line. It had to be accessed to prevent a utility failure." Karen interrupted. "He's lying. That gate was under HOA jurisdiction. I filed the easement amendment myself. The board approved it. And there it was, the line that would crack her entire facade." I handed the sheriff a folder. "Original easement. Filed 5 years ago. County stamped. Emergency access clause included. You'll notice there's no record of that easement ever being relinquished or amended through the county. Because it wasn't." He flipped through the pages. I watched his eyes narrow. Karen waved her stack again. "This says otherwise." He took it, skimmed the top page, then looked back at me. "This isn't a county document." "Nope," I said. "That's an internal HOA form. One she filed after installing a padlock on public utility access. No legal standing." I could see it in real time, the wheels turning, the puzzle snapping into place. "And Karen?" She was starting to sweat. She went on the defensive fast. "Well, it wasn't malicious. It was just oversight. I thought the HOA had full authority." "You filed an easement change without county notice," I said. "That's not oversight. That's fraud." The sheriff didn't put anyone in cuffs that morning, but he did step back, radio for backup, and call the county attorney's office. By noon, the dominoes started falling. A formal inquiry was opened within 24 hours. The fire marshal submitted a report detailing how Karen's padlock delayed a critical emergency response. The county utilities department sent a memo outlining how dangerously close we came to a pressure drop that could have triggered water boil advisories across 2 districts. But the real blow came when the county subpoenaed HOA records. And wow! Did we find gold? Karen had been busy, quietly rewriting portions of the HOA handbook, filing architectural enforcements without board votes, and, most damning of all, approving vendor contracts with zero oversight. One of those vendors, a landscaping company registered under her nephew's name, out-of-state address, P.O. Box, billing the HOA nearly twice the standard rate for monthly maintenance on areas that hadn't been touched in weeks. I thought that slope was just naturally overgrown. One neighbor said in disbelief. She said it was intentional landscaping. Nope. Just fake invoices for phantom work. At this point, what started as a locked gate had become a full-scale investigation into fraud, obstruction, and abuse of power. County legal called it a clear breach of public trust by a private actor. Karen tried to spin it, claimed it was an internal matter and that the board was handling it. But the board was already splintering. One member resigned via group email. Another left a sticky note on the HOA office door that read simply, "I didn't sign up for this." And then, like clockwork, the media caught wind. The headline, HOA Vice President under review after emergency access blocked during infrastructure crisis. Her clipboard became a meme. The gate became a landmark. And I became the guy who kicked his way into local legend. But as satisfying as it was to see Karen unravel, we all knew something bigger was coming. Because forged documents and fake landscaping invoices? Those don't end in committee meetings, they end in court. If Karen thought she was walking into a coronation, she seriously misunderstood the script. The emergency HOA meeting she scheduled was supposed to be her moment, her time to restore order, to punish unauthorized aggression, and to make an example out of me for daring to prioritize public infrastructure over her ego. She sent out glossy flyers. All caps emails. Even a text blast. The subject line: Community Standards at Risk, Urgent Action Required. It was as dramatic as it was delusional. I didn't RSVP. I just showed up, with the county water commissioner, a fire marshal, and 2 local reporters who smelled blood in the water. Word had already spread. And by the time we got there, the room was packed. People who hadn't attended a single HOA meeting in 5 years showed up early just to get a seat. You could feel it, like a storm about to break. Karen stood at the front, flanked by a projector and her favorite weapon, a PowerPoint presentation. She wore a pastel blazer, pearls, and a face full of smug confidence. She clicked to slide 1, a grainy photo of my broken gate. This, she began, voice firm, is what happens when we allow unauthorized modifications and rogue behavior to go unchecked. Murmurs in the crowd. I could already see Rick, the sweet board member who just wanted to plant begonias, scooting his chair an inch away from her. Karen pressed on, unaware that she was marching herself off a cliff. Today, she continued, I am bringing forth a motion to censure Mr. Mason for the destruction of HOA property and for actions unbecoming of a resident of Willow Creek. Then the fire marshal stood up. Before that motion proceeds, he said, voice like gravel and thunder, I'd like to clarify a few things for the record. Karen blinked. He pulled out a printed report. Our review confirms that Mr. Mason acted within the scope of county emergency response procedures. The gate was blocking access to a critical bypass valve during a live infrastructure route. Delays could have triggered a region-wide pressure failure. His actions prevented that. Dead silence. The county water commissioner followed up. Furthermore, she said, we have reviewed the easement documents. They were never legally amended through the county. The padlock and subsequent obstruction were unauthorized and violated multiple public access codes. Someone gasped. Karen's face began to change, her expression cracking like drywall in an earthquake. And then the bombshell landed. One of the reporters raised her hand. Ms. Wilkins, when you submitted the land use revision, did you know it hadn't been filed with the county? Karen hesitated. Well, no one told me, because you backdated the submission. The reporter cut in, holding up printed emails. You submitted it 3 days after the chain went up. That's falsification. The crowd erupted. Some murmured. One guy dropped his iced tea. I watched Rick slowly turn his nameplate upside down. It was like watching a queen lose her crown mid-sentence. The board never even got to vote on her motion against me. Instead, a new motion came forward, one that wasn't on the agenda, effective immediately. All enforcement actions by the HOA are frozen pending legal review. Translation: Karen, sit down. And she did, though not by choice. Her legs wobbled, and she clutched the podium like it might save her from drowning in her own consequences. But the hits kept coming. The subpoena documents had just started rolling in. What they showed: a masterclass in amateur corruption. Karen had signed off on the $9,000 landscaping contract, work that never happened, with a company registered to her nephew. The invoices? Backdated. The approval? Faked. The oversight? Non-existent. By the end of the week, she was stripped of her HOA title. The board voted to bar her from holding any future position. The county filed notice of pending criminal investigation. And quietly, like a shadow that finally lost its shape, Karen listed her house. I never saw the moving truck. No goodbye wave. No final community update email. One morning I stepped outside and her house was just dark. Mailbox empty. Porch bare. And that clipboard, the one that used to lean against her doorway like a symbol of power, was gone. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity doing its job. It's been 6 months since the chain snapped. You'd think, after all that drama, I'd want to move. Start fresh. Trade HOA meetings for mountain air and a mailbox that isn't monitored by a clipboard. But no, I stayed right here in Willow Creek. Same house. Same job. Same gate. Only now, that gate has a plaque, polished bronze, professionally engraved, screwed directly into the wood with industrial bolts. Just in case someone decides they don't like the message. It reads, "On this spot, a very dumb lock almost shut down a town. In memory of poor decisions and excellent timing." People laughed when they saw it. At first. Then they started asking questions. Tourists would pass through, squint at the plaque, and ask, "Wait, is this the gate? The viral gate?" One kid on a scooter pulled over, pointed at it, and said, "My mom showed me this on TikTok." Apparently, someone had taken a snippet of the firefighters rushing in after the kick, looped it over dramatic music, and labeled it, "Karen vs. County, Suburbia Showdown." It had over 2 million views. Karen became a meme, a legend, a warning. Screenshots of her emails, her HOA meeting outbursts, even that one frame where she's holding a clipboard like a sword, eyes wide with rage, that went viral under the caption, "When you've got zero jurisdiction but all the confidence." Meanwhile, Willow Creek changed. It started slowly. Neighbors, once terrified of fines for mismatched porch lights or the height of their grass, began waving again. Kids played soccer in front yards. People brought folding chairs to HOA meetings. Actual, reasonable discussions happened. Someone even suggested turning the old clubhouse into a co-op workspace. It felt human. The new acting board invited me to serve. I declined. I didn't want a seat at the table, I just wanted people to stop weaponizing the rule book like it was a manifesto. But they asked me to help revise the HOA charter. So I added one clause. No structure or access point shall be restricted if it directly obstructs critical municipal infrastructure. No exceptions. No chains. No Karening. Unanimously approved. Of course, not everyone forgot. Some still whispered about Karen, as if invoking her name might make her return like a HOA poltergeist. But she didn't come back. She sold her house quietly, took a loss, and disappeared. Just like that. Gone. And for a while, I thought it was over. Until the letter came. A certified envelope. Return address, another county. One town over. Inside, a single note from someone who introduced himself as Mark, a retired firefighter and Karen's new neighbor. It read, "Saw her moving in. Thought she looked familiar. She's calling herself Kathy now." Told the neighborhood the viral gate story was all fake, just city slander. Anyway, figured you'd want to know. "We'll keep the hydrants unlocked." I laughed, poured a drink, stared out at the plaque for a long time. Because here's the truth: no one tells you about disasters, whether it's a burst pipe, a collapsed bridge, or a clipboard-wielding zealot. They don't just break systems, they reveal them. Karen didn't just threaten a waterline. She exposed how fragile power becomes when it's built on fear, not trust. All she had to do was leave the gate alone. But she couldn't. She saw it as a threat, a crack in her control, a symbol of someone doing something outside her rules. And so she locked it. Not because it was dangerous, but because she couldn't stand the idea that someone else might have authority she didn't understand. That's what really scared her. Not the gate, not me. The idea that she was never actually in charge to begin with. Now, every time I walk past that side yard, I smirk a little. Not because I won, but because the plaque stays bolted to the wood. Because firefighters still nod when they drive by. Because the water kept flowing. And because somewhere out there, in some poor neighborhood, another Karen is eyeing a gate and thinking, "This'll show 'em." But maybe, just maybe, someone like me is already there. Wrench in one hand, sledgehammer in the other. Waiting, just in case.